Good morning all and welcome to another Jump recruitment discussion. Firstly, I hope you're all safe and well and you all got your gas and electric supply following the storms last week. I am now minus one garden fence. I am now minus half a large tree in the garden, which was home to a woodpecker, but the woodpecker's demise was its own fault because the tree's cut right in two where that little thing had been eating into the tree from there. Mr. Pye is with us today and he's still in his t-shirt and shorts. He's just advised us because he doesn't feel the cold whatsoever. And to me, that's all about planning and to make sure your apartment is nice and warm. So today we're going to talk about planning. And in light of the weather, this quote sort of made me chuckle. We need to plan ahead because it wasn't raining when Noah started to build his ark. According to Nazar, in the US, every month, round about 534,000 new businesses start. When the first 2 years, 7 out of 10 are still in business, whereas after 5 years, 5 out of 10 are still around. But interestingly enough, those businesses that managed to survive 5 years, 70% of them had followed a strategic business plan. Sometimes when we write business plans, and sometimes people think it's only for sort of large businesses. So Barclays did a lot of review on small businesses, and small business they found formally write business plans, but few have them actually written down. It's normally a verbal business plan. They said 1 out of 4, so 23% actually have a business plan. Approximately 47% of all UK businesses have some form of inverted commas formal business plan, and that's normally a verbalized business plan that's taking place. They did say though, and this was agreed with by Francis J. Green and Hop, that around about 30% of every small businesses that do survive the first 3 years of operation do so because of their business plan. A good business plan creates around about a 30% chance of growth, up to a 50% of doubling the chance of business. And the 4 main reasons why a business plan fails, according to Forbes, and I'm sure we're going to discuss this today quite a lot, is the belief that a budget is a plan, the reluctance to address the big issue, it's too complex and too complicated, and the failure to hold anybody accountable. So today I'm joined by Mr. Jacobs and Mr. Pye as well. We know Heather's still out with sand between her toes, and Mr. Sharp is somewhere in the UK. We're not too sure where. So let's kick off today. Gentlemen, why is it important then to plan?
Okay, hello everybody, welcome back and lovely to see you all. I can see blue sky here, Howard, unlike the frozen wastelands of the north, I believe, at the moment.
It is very cold up here.
It's warming up down in the Essex part of the world, as Dave Pye will validate. So why is it important to plan? I think as leaders, you know, and it's an obvious thing to state. If you can't see the future, if you can't anticipate what's coming around the curve, if you're not looking ahead beyond the now, then it's pretty reasonable to suggest that nobody else around you in the business is likely to be doing that. Great management, as indeed when you were a recruitment consultant, for lots of people, obviously we all started as consultants. Being able to anticipate what may or may not happen is the art of doing your job very well. That's the detail that's so important. And if you're leading a business and you expect people to follow you, then you have to have a vision. You have to understand where you're going, be very clear about the perspectives for the business, very clear about the targets. And I'm going way beyond, by the way, when I talk about targets, finance targets. To your earlier point, planning is not just about, understanding what the budgets are. It's so much deeper than that. So being very clear with your people about where the business is going over the next 12, 24, 36 months is absolutely critical. It's absolutely critical. So planning is absolutely what it's all about. There are things we can't plan for, i.e. a global pandemic. Who knew that was coming? But in general terms, we can reasonably look forward and start to understand what our markets are likely to be doing, our clients are likely to be doing, and importantly, start making plans to take advantage of the opportunities that we have predicted that we wish to take advantage of. Planning is critical as a leader. Without it, you have no direction, no method of accomplishing your journey.
It's funny, isn't it? Because I spent some time on site with one of our clients last week, and we were talking about where is our growth going to come from for next year. And I didn't have the quote that Howard started this meeting off with, that 30% chance of growth, 30% chance of better growth comes from having a good business plan. So if you think that that's an opportunity for growth, is to actually have a plan that you stick to, then, you know, in answer to the question, why is it important to have a plan? Because who doesn't want their business to grow? Who doesn't want to see at the desk, at the division, at the office, at the country level, who doesn't want their businesses to grow? So if that stat is as true as Barclays would indicate it would be, then to have a chance of growth next year and into the following years, you've got to have a plan together. And I'm sure we'll come on to what we do with our clients and jump forward plans. But obviously, you need a proper plan, and it does need to be written down. Yeah, a verbal plan, or a plan on notes, or a plan in a moleskin book, or an A4 folder, or on some app isn't quite the same.
Well, I'll get my invoice out to yourself and your client, Dave, promptly for that 30% from there. Work from there. I think, you know, when we look at, you know, why is pointing in planning, I think what we're talking about, to me, it's about the clarity of direction that the business is taking. If you plan it and write it down, it becomes more clarity. There's more conviction to where you want to go. And I think, to me, it's about providing those milestones to achieve. And I think sometimes planning is all about that risk, and I think some clients are very risk averse. So I think it's about putting yourself out there, putting a plan to help you to minimize that risk, but it helps you prepare, and it helps you to see what could fail, and so it helps you look at how you can stop failure in order to succeed. And I think if you only plan through rose-tinted glasses, then you only end up with half a plan. And I think planning should be about, you know, disasters are going to happen. We can't plan for everything, as Paul said, you know, but we should be looking at both sides of the coin and look at what is actually, figure out what is likely to happen and what potentially could the unexpected be. So we have a contingency plan. And I always say, if you look at both sides of the coin, then you can see, if you look to your biggest client and said, you know, what happens if they stop recruiting? And that's what our normal plan is. Well, what happens if they double their plan? What happens if they double their recruitment, etc.? So to me, planning is all about covering every possible avenue and create clarity for where the business needs to go. And I think a lot of people spend too much time planning and not doing, because they're trying to find the perfect plan rather than get the plan into place and execute what you can when you can to move forward.
Howard, I think, you know, you remember that film, Field of Dreams? Did anyone see that?
I do remember the Field of Dreams.
Okay,
yeah.
you remember the expression, if you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's one of my favorite films. And I think that's pretty true about planning. If you build it, they will come. If you can conceive it, there's a chance you can achieve it. And it's very important to have that. I think it's great for mental well-being. You know, just coming in every day, working with no clear direction is pretty dull. And it's very hard to get people up for it and excited about your business. If you're talking about staff attraction and retention, which no doubt we will talk about in a moment, it's pretty difficult to get people involved, buying into your vision, if you actually don't have one. So as a leader, it's so important to have that optimistic view about, as you've just said, Howard, about the future. What is it we can achieve? What are the opportunities? And you spread the joy, you spread that belief around you, with people around you, and having the right people with you gives you a great chance of achieving it.
Yeah.
So
when we were at Spring, we were in a position where we could buy companies. So we would have a lot of small, medium companies that would approach Spring to say, you know, you've got money, would you buy us? And when the M&A people from Spring would sit down with the founders of these companies, they would say, right, show us your plan for your business. And I don't know the exact percentage, but I would say 80% of them would show them a budget, to your point earlier, Paul. They would show them a budget with their numbers of what they're going to achieve in the next 5 years. And probably 20% of them actually had a plan. And there would be some part of that plan which would have numbers in, but it was only the plan that the M&A people were interested in, because the numbers wouldn't exist or wouldn't be hit if there wasn't a plan. And it's interesting, if that figure, if my rough guide is only 1 in 5 people actually do have a proper plan, as we all seek to grow our businesses, it's important to get it down.
So let's move that on then. So we're talking about planning, we're talking about that. So who should be involved in the actual planning and pulling together a plan?
Well, look, I think, as a leader, it's and if it's your business particularly, you're going to do what it says. You're going to lead on this. I mean, you have to have an ambition yourself. You've always had that as an owner because you set the business up in the first place. I mean, the biggest risk any owner has ever had is leaving gainful employment and setting up a business. That's a massive risk for anybody. And yet, you said, Howard, earlier that there are owners of businesses who, for understandable reasons, are very cautious, sometimes a little bit risk averse. Yet they've actually taken the biggest risk. They left gainful employment, set up a business. That's a big risk. So I think when you look at where your business is going, it obviously starts with the leader. It starts with the manager, the owner of the business. Where does that individual want to go? But you can't do this in isolation. It's really important that you have people around you involved in the planning. And we're going to talk about multifaceted planning in a moment. It's not, as Dave rightly said, it's not about the numbers. It is about the numbers, but it's not about the numbers. When we train consultants and we talk about that dreaded phrase KPIs, we talk about metrics and KPIs. We tell people that if you hit these numbers every day, the figures happen. And it's the same about planning. The numbers are the end result of all of the things you're going to do in order to achieve those numbers. So the real attention is on the plan, as Dave correctly said, not about the numbers. The numbers happen if you're doing all the right things consistently. So who are you going to be involving in the planning? Well, the very people who are going to be involved in every aspect of the improvement and direction of your business, who are going to execute the plan. So you can't, for example, sit there and have a brilliant idea about marketing or business development if ultimately you're not going to sit down and have the same conversation with the individuals who are going to try to execute that plan. And their involvement and their opinions are important.
Yeah.
One thing I would say is that I think when you read these, we've all read them, the classic effective executive books, it often will say, and we've often talked about this on the webinars and on the expos we attend and present at, that you want to get everybody's opinions. Absolutely. They don't, and in fact, it's quite healthy if they don't agree with you. Ultimately, once you've gathered everyone's views and thoughts and opinions, as the owner, you have to make the decision. In my opinion, it isn't a cooperative in that sense. You listen to everybody's views, and then a decision has to be taken, and that will fall on the shoulders ultimately of the owner or the manager or the leader.
Yeah, and I think often, Paul, the best plans, not every plan, but the best plans are ones that if you're running a boutique niche business, say with less than 20 staff, the best plans are the ones where everybody has had a say, has had an input into putting that plan together, because they then feel a part of it. And that's not just the customer facing people, that's also the people who are running the finance teams. And you may have a finance team of 2 people, or you may have a finance team of 1. But what is the effect on, say, the cash flow of going after very large, low margin business as opposed to some more niche, higher margin business? Well, you're going to need to have your finance person, you're going to need to have your marketing person to help you find where you're going to get your candidates from. And those people will have a say in it. And the more say that they have, or the more that you listen to their views and their opinions, the more they're going to buy into the plan. Ultimately, as a business owner, the buck stops with you. It's your decision what you're going to take on, what you're not going to take on, but where you can involve your staff. And certainly, if you're running a business with less than 15 staff, then they should all be involved in some way, because they will have their own individual plans as to how they're going to get to the ultimate objective.
I think what we're saying is that anyone in the business who can influence or can impact the business should be part of that business planning session.
Yeah.
And if you are a small business, then anybody within that business will have an impact on that and how that works. And I think from our comment, without blowing your trumpet, our own trumpet, you need to get somebody in to help you who is impartial, who can challenge your plan, because sometimes that's what happens, is that the owner of the businesses will dictate what that plan looks like, irrespective. And so although they've asked people to help influence that plan, for whatever reason they've overruled whatever it is, I think getting somebody who's impartial, who is used to planning and used to pulling plans together so they can plug the gaps. So adding that expert will help shape and set the plan, but also what they'll do is they'll help set accountability for who's delivering each individual section and part of that plan. And I think, to me, when we start to look at people who are involved, it's about the accountability of each person involved in that planning process to make sure that that plan goes from paper to actual function and doing, and then the accountability of delivering that function and doing becomes more important. So the question that we started to ask, and we started to sort of follow on then, once we start to create a plan and we understand who's doing what we're doing, etc., and who has the accountability, who should actually know about the plan? And this is one that's always contentious right across every company that we go on. Who should know about the plan and what's actually happening?
Well, you touched on an important point here, Howard, and that is we, all of us, everybody listening right now, and we included, have our strengths. We also, and our knowledge and expertise that is pretty much rock solid in certain areas. We also, I think all of us are acutely aware of our lack of knowledge or expertise in certain areas. So I think when you look at who we involve in the planning and who should know about the plan, to your point, I think it's absolutely critical that in areas outside of our own strengths and knowledge, you're tapping into the experience of experts around you. Now, some of those experts actually sit in your own business, and don't underestimate expertise. So, for example, at a basic level, I don't mean to sound demeaning when I say that, but when I used to do roadshows, as it were, at my old business, sometimes, quite often actually, the best ideas that we got regarding our planning for the future came from maybe these more junior people in the business who were working with our candidates and working with the public, who had some absolutely brilliant thoughts and insights into how we could improve our service levels beyond anything that I knew about, because I wasn't doing what they were doing. I wasn't at the sharp end at that time. So expertise can come in all shapes and sizes and from all elements of the business. But to your earlier point, I also think that where you don't have the expertise inside your business, then you need to look outside of your business. And as you say about blowing our trumpets, to people like ourselves, or a marketing expert, for example, or you're leaning into your finance expert, your accountant, and so on. I think to get a well-rounded plan, I would want to be talking to people that I think reasonably will add value to what we are trying to achieve, with expertise and guidance that sits outside of my own knowledge base. I also think, just to sort of round this answer off, when you talk about who should know about the plan, let's look at it externally, because we're in a situation as an industry, like every industry we serve, where we're short on candidates. We're short of people that want to work in our business. We're all desperately looking to bring extra people into our companies. So once we know what the plan is and everybody has signed up to it and we're excited about it, shout about it. Shout about it through a range of different media. So not only are you influencing the people inside your business, you're letting people know outside of your business what you're doing, where you're going, what direction the business is going, because you want to attract people to work for you. You want to retain great people in your business, and it doesn't do any harm at all if your clients know how ambitious you are and what direction you're going in.
I always find when you do that, Paul, whatever thing, it's like that fitness goal or that dieting goal. They always say, if you really want to achieve it, tell all your mates what you're trying to achieve, because they'll hold you accountable to that. And what you're doing is you're creating accountability by shouting out to the whole world, saying, I've done that. And I think Ali was the greatest one at that, shouting, I am the greatest right from day one. And so he had to go out and prove that he was the greatest. Dave, your comments on who?
Well, firstly, I have to go slightly off piste here and say that this is a momentous moment for me. Some of you know I've got 3 teenage boys and a 20-year-old, and I'm sitting on a webinar with a quote from Lil Wayne.
I don't even know who that is.
And they will be so proud of me. To our audience, I apologise for this moment of epiphany for me, but this is a great moment, because normally we have some older people, and now we've got Lil Wayne as our quote.
Well, I had gone from Margaret Thatcher to Lil Wayne, so I thought that was a great segue.
What is the world coming to, that we've got Margaret Thatcher and Lil Wayne on our webinars? But it is what you're saying about who should know. it's important that everyone knows the plan. You know, if everyone's involved in it, and most companies will have some form of kick-off meeting, strategic meeting, whatever you may call it, and that's where you share what's going on. That's the bit that you're telling your staff, this is the way we're going, this is the direction of travel, this is how it's going to get there, this is your part in it. We've used some external people to help us get here, whether that's advisors, whether that's marketing, whatever it may be. But now this is the journey we're on together. And you can't do it without a map. Look at us now. When we first started, there wasn't Google Maps. We had the old A to Z. And I often think now, how on earth would I get to some of the clients I have to go to if I can't just put it in my car or put it in my phone? But we managed, but we still had some way of knowing where we were going. And that plan needs to be shared and needs to be owned. And then as leaders, and we do this as the 5 of us at Jump, we're accountable for our plan. We make sure each of us is accountable for what we have to do to deliver to the plan. And that's an important aspect of it. So I'd involve everybody.
It's interesting. We have our business meetings and our board meetings, etc. And then with fortnightly, we have accountability meetings, don't we, to keep ourselves. And I think, my comment when we sort of who's appointed to the plan, my view is what we're saying is right, everybody, because I think even the smallest cog in the watch has a huge part to play to make sure that watch actually works and works at its best. So everyone in your business has a part to play. And I think, do they know what that part is? And do they know how their part and delivering their part has the effect on the whole business? So if you think about, if you're trying to deliver your plan by yourself, then it's going to be very hard. And that's why sometimes business owners are always find it's a very lonely place, because you're trying to deliver the plan by yourself. Where if you actually build a team, succession planning, creating an operation board, play a delivery board, etc., so then it's all about the whole business being accountable, not just for the sales side of the business, but also for the strategic side of the business. And what we're talking about is, that sales part isn't a plan. That's just a target to go at, but that's what we account the majority of our business to. We point them towards that sales plan. We never really apportion part of the strategic plan to help us become successful. And I think that's when we start to spread that right across. So it's not just about spreading the financial plan, it's spreading the strategic plan across your business as well. So here's a killer question that we sort of, I think most people have tuned in for. In your opinions then, what are the 4 things that you need to plan? And I've written loads down, knowing that you guys are going to go first. So I'm thinking, what's going to be left?
Okay. Well, I mean, that is a killer question. I'm going to start with the most, I'll give you my 4, and I'll start with the most important one. As far as I'm concerned, I don't think there'll be many that will disagree. People, our people. So for me, it's always been about people focus. I mean, I'm not naming names, but I spend a lot of time talking to clients every day. We talk about lots of things. The clients that are making the most headway, who are developing their businesses at the quickest pace, are without a shadow of doubt the people who are focused on their people, their own people. So people development, training, L&D, welfare of those individuals, the whole kit and caboodle of taking care of people, mentoring, which we guys do a lot of. All of that is like the number one thing for me, because the rest of it cannot be achieved unless your people are on board, feel loved, adored, challenged, if you like, pushed to express themselves and reach their potential and so forth. Having the right people around you who are bought in, completely loyal, will get you a long way down that road. So number one for me, planning is around what we're going to do for our people next year. I would say second, no particular order now from here on in, but I would say obviously things around business development and account management. Again, we've spent a lot of time talking about that on these webinars, but where is the business going to come from? I've coached somebody this morning on strategic selling, strategic account management. We talked a lot about this particular subject. I think Mr. Sharp has said in the past that 70% of new business comes from existing business, from 30% of your current client base. That's true. So where is the business going to come from? Is your business going to look exactly as it looked last year, a year on? No, the answer is no. The client base shifts and changes. So what's your target? I think marketing for me is another area particularly that's so important these days. And I'm going to link that to candidate attraction. I sat in on a marketing conference, a virtual one a few weeks ago. It was very good. And every single one of the marketing experts talked at length about candidate attraction. None of them spent any time talking about client attraction through marketing. And we all know, of course, that we're in this candidate short market. So, and that's not likely to change very much next year. So the fact is, marketing for me links directly to candidate attraction, and those two things are critically important.
Obviously, very easy for me to say what he said.
I'm never going to let you get off of that, Dave.
Oh no, so I think as I look ahead 2022, my 4 key things, and we didn't talk about this beforehand. So one is retention. So it goes back to Paul's point about people. The number one thing in a plan is how are you going to retain the people that you've got, the ones that you want to keep. And even if there are those that you're not sure you want to keep them, is there a way of you making them better and investing in them so that they stay? It's the same sort of thing for our clients. We exist because there's churn in the market. What we don't want is lots of churn from our own businesses, because there just aren't as many good people around. So that for me, number one. Number two, in terms of planning, is what are the influences on your customers? Well, what is going on in your customers' world in 2022 that's going to change what's going on for the type of skills that you're going to have to hire for them? Doesn't matter what the sector is. Clearly, things like healthcare and COVID and pandemics and all of that has had a dramatic effect if you're providing vaccine people. There's so much going on in the world of work. Well, what's going on? What are the key things to articulate from your customer's point of view? Third thing that's really important for me is your own development as a business leader. What are you doing to make yourself better? What can you identify skills that you've got that have brought you to where you are today, that have got you to running the business that you've built? But how are you going to make yourself better? How are you going to invest yourself in 2022? I think that's a key aspect of a plan. And the last one, we talk a lot at Jump about the 5 areas of scaling a business from the first gear up to the 5th gear. So where are you on that journey? You know, are you running a business that's now 15 years on and you wish something had happened, but it hasn't? So what's going to happen now? What's going to change? What's going to look different? Or are you just setting up in a new business with a view to, actually, I would like something to happen for my business in the next 3 years or 4 years or whatever it is. So where are you on that journey for scaling? And they're the 4 things that I'd concentrate on in planning.
So some 8 really good tips there for everybody to listen to. So as we now get to the bottom of the barrel and scraping around the barrel, that's what you've left me with. So I'm going to just jump back into the customer one, because I wrote down customer listening, that we've got to listen to what our customers have to say. But I also then put ×3 next to that. And what ×3 was that we have 3 types of customers. We have our clients, we have our candidates, but we also have our consultants. They really are our customers. And if we look after our customers and listen to what they're doing, then we need to do that. So the first thing I'd throw in would be what I would class as a Darwin strategy, to look at adapt or die. What are we adapting? What are we changing? What are we building? Okay, because if we don't adapt and change for what's happening in the future, then we are going to start to go backwards and start to die. And I think a lot of people look for what's happening now, what's happening today, and don't plan what's happening in the future. So I think a sort of some form of Darwin project would be really good, to look at what we adapt to stop us dying from there. I think we need to define absolutely in our plan our short-term and our long-term goals, and how we're going to achieve those short-term and long-term goals, because I think it's really important that when we start to look at what we've planned, what is short-term, what we're going to get a quick gain from, what is long-term that's going to need a long-term view and a long-term strategy on. And that can be all sorts of things. You know, that could be our retention strategy, that could be part of our client strategy. Some clients we can open up straight away. Some clients might take us 2 years to get through the door because it's got a large PSL, etc. So what are our defined short-term and long-term strategies? I think we need to have in all planning some sort of decision-making strategy to prevent paralysis in the business. there's too many people that talk and talk and talk about things and then never actually get to do things. So I think there needs to be a decision-making process that gets things moving really quickly and stops that business paralysis from there. And then what we're left with then is the things that we talk about is, as Paul's talked about, that sales growth. If 70% of our business comes from our existing client base and it's about expanding that existing client base, then to me, I'm going to look at that extra 30% and say, right, what have I got that fills that 30%? And so my strategy will be about looking at what new blood am I bringing into the business. And that's new blood, not from a client base, but from a candidate base and from a consultant base. How am I going to bring those things in and what am I going to do? So those things are the things that I would look at, are the 4 things that sort of add to the 8 things that Dave and Paul have said. And when you start to then think about all of those things and put them together in a strategy, boy, are we going to be busy looking at the strategic side of the business, because not one of us has talked about the actual financial side and putting a financial target in. It's all about the strategy to get things doing. So then when we flick that, the question then would be, what are the non-negotiables when it comes to planning?
And that's the finance thing, Howard. That's the bit about, you've got the vision, you've got your purpose, you've got your staff involved in the strategic direction, and they're telling you what's going on the ground, and you put a plan together. Then you've got to put the finance in to see that you can afford it, or to see if that's something you want to invest in and park some profits or chance of profits for investment. And you need to do that, and I'm sure you all know this, but you need to do that from a cash flow point of view and from your P&L profit point of view. You can't really have a plan that doesn't have some numbers attached to it, unless you're in a very, very fortunate position of being able to park any cash generation or any profit for a year or two while you build your business. That's also important if you're thinking, actually, I need an investor or some external investment to help me get to the next stage. Because part of that plan may be, actually, I want to set up a new division, or I want to operate in a new country, or I want to operate in, I'm doing all contract, I want to do perm, or vice versa. And you may need some, you will need some aspect of cash or access to money. So the numbers for me is non-negotiable. It's got to have a number attached to it.
And I'll add to that, Dave. I think you're absolutely right, absolutely true. I was going to say there are several things that would be in my mind. One of them would be margins. So, I mean, at the present time, several of my clients are engaging upon increasing fees, setting margins for next year, both for permanent fees and contract temps, so forth. I think those things, margins, are linked to the service levels. You can't put yourself in a position as a business where you are seeking, for example, to be a premium provider of staff, unless, in my opinion, you're also to some extent linking that to your charges. If you are going to be the same as everybody else, you're going to end up having the same kind of fee levels. So I think margins are extremely important. And for me, if you're setting those margin targets for next year or the year after and so forth, then I think you've got to be completely firm about that. There are some business you do not want, some business you do want, and in the end, you're going to be pushing hard to maintain those margins. And that's particularly important at the moment when we know that inflation is going to be hitting around 4% next year. So something to be particularly guarded against is making sure you are very rock solid on what your pricing model is going to be. I think something perhaps more ephemeral around non-negotiables would be your values. There are things that I think are non-negotiable. So, and I think that's a broad statement, but it's about the values you hold dear as an owner, as a business, the behaviors that you expect and want to see within your business, and the attitudes of your people towards your clients, your candidates. Those things for me are absolutely non-negotiable. They're the guiding light. It's quite easy, I think, to make pretty tough decisions about stuff, for example, when you're clear in your mind about what the values and the vision, the values and the behaviors are in your business. If people cross those lines, it's very difficult, I think, to come back from it. Those things have always been, for me, non-negotiable. It's not related to people's feeability. It's absolutely related to their inclusion within the values and the behaviors of my business. Those things I find impossible to bend. If we have those things as part of a business, this is the way we want to behave and operate, then people hopefully conform because they want to, they feel comfortable with it. Those that can't or don't want to conform, there's no place for them in my business. So those things I think are non-negotiable.
It's interesting that, you know, although people probably think we don't plan these sessions, you know, we send the questions out the day before, but we never see what each of us are going to, how each of them are going to answer the question. So it's always interesting to listen to what everyone has to say. And I think what Dave's saying is absolutely right. You need to stay profitable, and that cash in the bank is really important. So is your strategy working? How's it being executed? Do the people like it? And does it drive cash into the bank? Are the four things that I try and talk to my clients about constantly. And then, as Paul said, looking after your customers. But remember, it's not just your candidates and your clients. Yeah, the biggest value to your business is your consultants. So how are you looking after that? So a massive focus on your client there. The thing that I said to me as my non-negotiable would be is that when we start to write a business plan, it's actually executing to the plan. So keeping it up to date, adapting it, but never reducing the goals, and then tracking the progress and communicating that progress to all to ensure the plan then reflects the mission and the values. So if you've written a plan in January, but you don't talk about it until December, then how do you know you've actually kept on the plan? How do you know the business where you are? So to me, the communication of the plan and how we're going along that journey to get to the end goals and reach the milestones, that to me is the non-negotiable on there. So the question then when we start to look at that non-negotiable is, how often should we be reviewing our plan?
I think it's daily. It sounds a bit glib, but I think that we work in an industry where things happen on a daily basis. You know, we're constantly under the cosh every day. It's one of the reasons we love the business. It's such an addictive buzz. Things change consistently, and things can change consistently in a moment. It sounds a bit glib to say, are you reviewing? I'm not suggesting you're poring over, as Dave said, the written plans every day, checking every I is dotted and every T is crossed. But what I am saying is, I think you're consistently looking at, on a daily basis, considering decisions that relate or do not relate to your business plan, and adapting, as you said rightly, Howard, earlier, to the conditions and what's going on. One of the great things about working in a small business is that you always have the ability to be agile and nimble, make decisions on the day that can have a profound impact on your business. The bigger corporations, and most of us have worked for them, take a much longer period of time to make decisions that are strategic for the company, often months, sometimes longer. When you're a small business, you can smell the air, make a decision that will at that moment make a big impact, positive impact on your business. So for me, I don't think it's a question of getting those plans out on a daily basis, dusting them down and reviewing them, but I do think that you are welded to those plans and you are looking at them, keeping them in the front of brain every day relative to every decision that you're taking leading the business.
Back to decision-making paralysis then, basically. Yeah, preventing that.
Yeah, exactly.
Dave?
Well, if we've had a little Wayne on our seminar, no reason I can't quote a Taylor Swift lyric. Because she's got a lyric that says, just because you've made a plan doesn't mean that's what's going to happen.
I nearly had that on the list, Paul, but I thought, Dave, sorry, but I thought having one singer on and then having Taylor Swift was too much of a contrast.
That's a great line, and it answers the question about how often should you look at it. I would say if you've got a written plan, you should at least be looking at, as a leader, you should be at least looking at it weekly. Just where are we? This is the journey. This is the direction of travel. How am I getting on as a business leader? I'm accountable to these people I've got in my business, whether it's 3, 5, or 50. How am I getting on with this plan? So once a week to look at that plan, for me, I think is really good. And the reality is, as Paul said, so much happens day to day in our businesses that actually you don't then look at it weekly. You end up thinking, I was going to do this on Friday, but that got moved because someone didn't start and I needed to replace them, or I had to do a pitch, or I needed to revise something. So then I'll look at it on Wednesday, and then it turns out to be every 10 days or so. It's just having that discipline of saying, actually, here it is. And, you know, I'm looking at it. Some of the clients I've worked with, they have it on their wall. They have their year plan on their wall. So it's there all the time. Whether anybody looks at it as often as they would like them to, It doesn't matter. The fact is, it's there if you're having a cup of tea or whatever. And what they've done quite successfully is ping it as a backdrop on some of the calls that they do, because obviously some people are still working from home. So just because you're working from home, you're still involved in the organisation. You can still see what they're doing, and the plan is at the forefront of what's going on.
I think if you combine those two together, we're absolutely right. How often do we go in and see a company and they say, "Oh, yeah, we've got a business plan," and they bring it out, and you go, "Oh, just by the way, the date on this plan is 2007." Yes. Really, yes. We're still in 2007. Yeah, so we've got to start to look at it really on a very regular basis and daily to make sure we're following the plan and understanding what's going on. So the last question of the day, because we're sort of running out of time. So Sun Tzu, the author of The Art of War, said, "Plan what is difficult while it's easy and do what is great while it's small." So for you, from a business planning point of view, what does that mean to you for 2022?
I think, we've been talking on these webinars for quite some time. For me, looking at 2022, and I know we're all of us, as I'm sitting here looking at my screen, there's stuff popping up from Sky alerts around the new strain of the coronavirus and so forth. There's an awful lot of things that we're all having to deal with that we have absolutely no control over. Some of those things may have an effect on us and some may just disappear into the ether. I've always said, let's not worry too much about the things that we can't control. Let's focus on the things we can control. And if you're focusing on the things that you can control, then there's no point in worrying about those things either, because you're dealing with them. So for me, I think it's about, when you're looking at 2022, being incredibly ambitious. My view about next year is that we are in for a good year ahead. Forget about the naysayers. I think we have a brilliant opportunity over the next 12 months to really push forward. So if you're planning what the future is going to be like, what it could be like, plan for what is difficult whilst it's easy. I would suggest that you have big ideas, big plans. And as you said, Howard, at the beginning, you involve your people with you in those ambitions and those plans. And, we've often said it's a real corny expression, but if you aim for the stars, and you hit the moon, that's still quite some distance from where you are right now. So for me, it's about the detail, but it's definitely not about small things. I think have some big ideas, big views, big ambitions, and go for it with the full weight of your people around you.
Dave?
I know this that book, that quote comes from a book that's many hundreds and hundreds of years old. He didn't work in recruitment because it was never easy.
He was planning war for the Chinese emperors, which is probably a little bit more stressful, I think, than recruiters at that time in the 4th century. In the Ming.
Probably, but I think sometimes running a recruitment business is like trying to prepare war against the Chinese emperors. It's never that easy. I think if you've got a plan, it is going to make it easier.
Yeah.
So my reflection on that quote is, what makes it easier, and nothing in recruitment is easy, but what makes it easier is you've got a plan. You've got something to fall back on to say, actually, this is the direction, this is where I'm going, and this is how I'm going to get there. And you can change it. I've used this quote that I've said many times: strategy is episodic, not annual. Everything doesn't change every year in recruitment, it changes every day.
Yes.
You think you're going in one direction and something happens and you've got to go in another direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
As long as you've got the foundation, as long as you've got the basis of the plan or something, you can navigate with that. You can navigate with the changes. It's one of the reasons why I love recruitment. Once you get into it, it's very difficult to get out of it, because it's just so different every day. But it's never easy. But I do think, to Paul's point, I think we're in for a bumper year next year. So I would encourage everybody listening to this to be as ambitious as you possibly can be, and then some.
So we talk a lot about planning. We do a lot of planning. We write a lot of plans. We review a lot of plans. But to me, what makes those plans work is the actual doing. And so no matter what you do every day, it's the doing that makes the plan that comes to life. So sometimes to me, what's simple is getting out of your comfy chair, stepping out your comfort zone, embracing the discomfort, and go away and actually deliver the plan. Because I think that's what some business people fear, is delivering that plan. So plan what you want to do while it's easy, whilst it's fresh in your mind, then break it down into small bite-sized chunks, get your knife and fork out and tuck in, because I think it's about time we started to look at that. Writing the plan is exciting, but what makes it exhilarating is doing it and achieving what you planned. And I think that is where we get to, and that's what we've got to start to look at as we start to sort of think about planning and what planning actually means. So that's the end, I think, from planning. Paul and Dave, thanks very much for your input.
Pleasure,
Next week, we're going to talk about training, but not as you've heard us talk about it before in the past. We're going to talk about training to retain people, training to grow people, training to motivate people. So we're going to look at training in a slightly different way. So as I've had a cancellation from a client this afternoon on COVID, Paul's had a couple of clients cancellation of COVID as well. Obviously, it's back and it's doing the rounds, etc., etc. So please all stay safe, especially with the new variant around. So I wish everyone who's got COVID and their family and friends that have got COVID stay safe, stay warm, stay welcome. Okay, and we look forward to seeing you all again next week. Thank you very much for attending. It's been another exciting session. Thank you, Dave and Paul, and
Thanks,
see you all next week.
Bye, everybody. Take good care.
Next week, we're joined by Travis Scott.
I will try find a training quote from Travis Scott.
See you later.
See everybody. Bye.